clear, but as a Member of Parliament I have a responsibility for British jobs, British workers.
Your job is to represent the public, the people who elect you. Start doing your job. If you don't like it, clear off.
What unfolds when a leader is confronted not for their popularity or credibility, but because their position arose by default, when no other viable options were available? This is precisely the scenario Danny Dyer addressed when he voiced his opinion on Keir Starmer. Dyer minced no words in his critique, stating, "I don't like this man. I don't trust this man. He was handed the position without earning it." His pointed question, "What are you going to do to prove you're different?" resounds with a challenge for accountability. What's more striking is how Starmer has directed his attention squarely at pensioners, a demographic of deep social and political significance. The unfiltered audacity of Dyer's remarks is nothing short of captivating. In an era where diplomacy often dilutes discourse, his refusal to sugarcoat his views is both refreshing and provocative, drawing listeners into a deeper contemplation of leadership, trust, and action.
He's in Europe, in Nice, with his trotters up, yeah? Where is the geezer? I think he should be held accountable for it. He should be held accountable for it.
It's a valid point. A lot of people do feel that...
In his assessment, Starmer failed to cultivate or earn the trust of the public. Instead, he ascended to power not through merit or widespread support, but as the inevitable default, a consequence of the vacuum left by the Conservatives' tumultuous governance. This observation raises a compelling and timely question. How can one place trust in a leader who has not actively won their confidence, but has merely stepped in to fill a void? Such a scenario challenges the foundational principles of leadership and legitimacy, inviting deeper reflection on what it truly means to lead by example versus inheriting authority by circumstance.
Well, you're following the process, but there's a bigger principle at stake, that Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign.
That is why the Labour Party set up those rules.
But you won't tell.
A palpable sense is emerging that Keir Starmer fails to truly resonate with the everyday struggles of ordinary people. What is particularly striking, however, is the irony of this disconnect. The Labour Party, historically regarded as a champion of the working class, now seems increasingly remote and detached. Under Starmer's leadership, it appears as though the party's once vibrant connection to its foundational values has gradually eroded, with the very heart of Labour shifting away from its roots. This evolution prompts a profound question about the party's direction and its ability to remain in touch with the electorate it once sought to serve.
A pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
I'm not disputing that. I don't have any problem.
So is it a pledge that these industries will be in your manifesto for nationalisation?
Yes, it is. The point I'm making to you is the manifesto will have to have a lot more than that.
Of course, I understand
not a manifesto.
Well, what about university tuition fees then? Will you remain committed to scrapping them in
They're
your first
all
term?
pledges, Andrew. So the answer to these questions is yes.
While Keir Starmer's ascent to leadership may already seem precarious, Angela Rayner's position within Labour's ranks is similarly raising questions. As a representative of the working class, many had anticipated that Rayner would serve as a stabilizing force in Labour's leadership, providing a necessary counterbalance to Starmer's more moderate stance. However, the reality appears more complicated. She has largely remained passive as Starmer has made decisions that seem increasingly at odds with the interests of the very people she purports to represent. It's as though she finds herself torn between her working-class origins and her responsibilities within the party's hierarchy. When subjected to pointed questions in interviews, Rayner's responses have often served to compound the doubts surrounding her leadership. At times, her answers have lacked conviction, with moments where her words faltered and her arguments seemed inadequately prepared. This raises a critical concern. How can someone who is supposed to be the vanguard for the working class be so reluctant and uncertain when placed under scrutiny? The issue here is not merely in the content of her statements, but in her apparent acquiescence to the decisions being made around her. This passive complicity undermines the very cause she claims to champion.
To remind you that you have said yourselves as a government, we're going to need 2.5 million migrants. Some of them, by the way, people are going to build the houses. Suddenly, there's a lot of housing. Where are these people going to go?
Well, Trevor, first of all, when you say about building as well, the previous government did use migrant labour far too much instead of actually building skills here in the UK. I've announced £140 million for new construction hubs so that we can train people here to deliver those housing. So I don't accept that we're going to bring migrants in for that. We've always said that actually we need to skill our own people up. But equally, we need to build the homes that people need.
So, there are plenty of homes, she says, but we have a housing crisis. Plenty of houses, plenty of homes in this country, but we have a housing shortage. Which is it, Angela? You're going to have to make your mind up. Do we have a housing shortage, or do we have too many houses? That's what you said. You said we have plenty of houses, but we've got a housing shortage. Which is it? Don't you know? And don't you think, Russell, that she should get a better answer for Trevor Phillips's excellent point? Said if you crunch the numbers, 5 out of every 7 of these alleged new homes that the government's going to build.
The growing frustration surrounding Angela Rayner's position within Labour's leadership is increasingly difficult to ignore. Given her background, deeply rooted in the struggles of everyday people, one might reasonably expect Rayner to serve as a vocal and determined advocate for the working class, challenging policies that don't align with their interests. Yet, rather than offering resistance, she has largely acquiesced to Keir Starmer's decisions. This raises a pivotal question. Where is the Angela Rayner who once vowed to champion the rights and concerns of those she represents? Is her loyalty to Starmer now overshadowing her commitment to the very working class she was meant to defend? The tension within Labour's leadership transcends mere policy disagreements. It lies in the erosion of trust that their actions, particularly Rayner's passive stance, are fostering. For Rayner, this mounting distrust presents a storm she appears ill-equipped to confront, casting a shadow over her credibility and her future within the party.
Today, change has already begun, with a £22 billion boost to get our NHS back on its feet and tackle the waiting list. Great British Energy turbocharging the drive for clean energy. Investment in our buses and putting railways back on the path to public ownership.
Labour's housing plan had the potential to be transformative. The promise of constructing 1.5 million homes was initially presented as a significant victory. However, it is the finer details of the proposal that are proving to be a source of considerable concern for Angela Rayner. Critics have raised alarms, suggesting that a substantial portion of these homes, 5 out of every 7, will be allocated to migrants. These claims are not baseless. They are grounded in Labour's own data, particularly statistics circulated by Rachel Reeves. Despite this, Rayner has adamantly denied the allegations, asserting that the primary aim of the housing plan is to address the housing crisis for all citizens, regardless of background. However, when Rayner attempts to clarify these points, her explanations fall short. The numbers she presents fail to align with the concerns being raised, and rather than alleviating doubts, her responses only serve to amplify the perception of a leader who is both unprepared and, at times, disconnected from the realities of public sentiment. While it is one thing to publicly endorse a policy, it is another to defend it effectively, especially when the arguments supporting it are tenuous at best. The deeper issue here is not simply the numbers themselves, but the erosion of trust that these inconsistencies are fostering among the very people Labour claims to serve.
They raised the capital gains tax in the coalition government.
Well, what I'm saying, Andrew, and
what you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying, you don't cut taxes when you need that money to help. You should be investing.
You don't know, do you?
You should be investing in those services. No, Andrew, I'm talking about investment with the money we've currently got.
When Labour's own figures fail to align with the statements of its leadership, it raises a critical question. Who can the public truly trust? Angela Rayner's credibility is now squarely at stake. The housing crisis is an urgent and undeniable reality, and the public is demanding effective solutions. Yet, when the proposed answers appear so disjointed and inconsistent, it only intensifies the growing sense of uncertainty and skepticism surrounding the leadership of Labour. Instead of offering clarity and reassurance, the confusion surrounding the plan deepens the public's mistrust, leaving many to question whether the party is capable of delivering on its promises.
That more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants.
Well, that's not the truth, and that's not the case.
What will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because where the
2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses, and then say there's plenty of housing already.
Perhaps the most poignant aspect of the current crisis for many is the perception that Labour, a party historically rooted in working-class values, appears to have abandoned 2 of its most loyal and vulnerable constituencies, pensioners and farmers. The erosion of support began with cuts to essential benefits, such as winter fuel payments, leaving many older citizens feeling betrayed by a party that once promised to safeguard their well-being. However, the discontent didn't end there. Revisions to inheritance tax, an essential safeguard for farming families, have reverberated throughout rural communities, leaving those who have worked the land for generations reeling. For Angela Rayner, this situation is deeply personal. As someone whose roots lie firmly within the working class, how can she, in good conscience, stand by while policies are enacted that directly harm the very people she was elected to serve? Farmers, in particular, are increasingly feeling singled out by these measures. These are families who have spent decades contributing to the nation's economy, only to now face an uncertain future under policies that seem indifferent to their years of hard work and sacrifice.
The truth is, this winter, people will be suffering because of his choices. The economy is shrinking, inflation is going up, and jobs are being lost because of his budget. Pensioners won't be able to heat their homes because of his government's decisions. They raised people's hopes but then smashed them with broken promises. And now we learn that he is about to give away our hard-won Brexit freedoms. Mr. Speaker.
The more pressing issue at hand is Labour's fundamental failure to uphold its promises to the working class, pensioners, and farmers. These groups, who were meant to be the party's cornerstone of support, have instead become the hardest hit by the government's early decisions. This situation goes beyond mere policy disagreements. It represents a profound breach of trust. When the very foundation of trust begins to erode, one must ask, what remains to sustain the party's credibility and legitimacy? Angela Rayner's silence on these critical issues speaks volumes, resonating far more powerfully than any statement could. For many, her inaction represents a betrayal that is increasingly difficult to overlook. Labour entered power with bold assurances. Pensioners were promised that their benefits would remain secure, while the working class was guaranteed they would not face higher taxes. Yet, as soon as the party assumed office, these promises began to unravel. Rather than prioritizing the protection of these groups, they have instead become the first to bear the brunt of financial strain. Tax increases are quietly being introduced, and pensioners, those who have dedicated their lives to contributing to the nation, are now witnessing cuts to the very benefits they rely on. This stark reversal is not merely an unfortunate consequence of governance. It is a failure to honor the commitments made to the people who believed in the party's vision.
You're paid to do, and if you can't, get out and let someone else have a go.
But again, it's the blatant, there's playing at being these rich people. You know, they're all these grace and favour properties. Angela Rayner's about to be moved into a flat, I think, that royalty have lived in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She's about to be moved, so Admiralty Place or something. So she's going to be moving into that. Keir Starmer's got his grace and favour, you know, not only number 10, but the big country estate, Chequers. Is it Chequers? Yeah. And then Rachel Reeves has got the other place.
For many, the actions of Labour's leadership feel nothing short of a betrayal. Labour, a party once synonymous with championing the working class, has seemingly reversed course with its first acts in power, targeting those it once vowed to protect. Winter fuel payments, a crucial support for countless pensioners, was slashed, leaving many feeling abandoned. Meanwhile, farmers, who have long worked relentlessly to sustain the nation, are now confronted with inheritance tax reforms that jeopardize their livelihoods and the future of their families. At the heart of this situation lies a fundamental crisis of trust. Labour campaigned on the promise of safeguarding these very groups, yet their policies have done the opposite. How can the public place their faith in a party that espouses one set of values during a campaign and then implements the complete opposite once in power? For families who have devoted generations to building their lives and contributing to the nation, these policy shifts represent far more than mere adjustments. They are deeply personal, striking at the core of their existence. Labour must now confront a critical question. If it no longer stands for the working class, then what exactly does it stand for?
Well, if you own a farm or land, you have an additional £1 million inheritance tax than anyone else does. So already they have additional land that they can pass on without paying any inheritance tax. Yep. And indeed, 73% of farms last year would not pay any inheritance tax at all, even after our changes. And
Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner enter leadership with bold promises of solutions, yet growing numbers are left wondering, Do they even have a comprehensive and viable plan? From an external perspective, their leadership appears increasingly unstable, with policies that seem more like temporary fixes than substantial, long-term strategies. The public anticipated that Labour would offer both clarity and assurance in navigating the complex challenges of governance. Instead, they are witnessing a disjointed narrative marked by confusion, inconsistency, and a lack of cohesive direction. The promise of transformative leadership is quickly being overshadowed by the reality of a party struggling to deliver on its own commitments.
Also unenforced errors. No one was calling for this farming policy. I think with the national insurance, 25 billion, you could say, well, I had to do that for the NHS, etc. But this was trivial sums. And so I think that, look, Keir Starmer is not going to stand there in an interview and put his hands up and admit he got it wrong. A more aware government
Wouldn't that be the smart thing to do, though, just to say, look, we had to reset the whole thing a couple of weeks back. We did that because obviously some of what we were doing was perceived wrongly or something. Say something to acknowledge the fact that people are not happy.
I think that there's a way of doing a U-turn. I'm not sure we're going to just come out and say it honestly in a question. And of course, a cynic might say, why break the habit of a lifetime and give an honest answer to an honest question?
Consider, for instance, Labour's economic policies. The party made explicit promises that it would not raise taxes on ordinary citizens, yet it has targeted pensioners and farmers with decisions that seem both abrupt and inadequately thought through. These actions, rather than reflecting well-considered strategies, give the impression of being hasty, reactive measures. Even Angela Rayner, who comes from a working-class background and was expected to offer a voice of reason, has struggled to provide a compelling defense for these controversial choices. When the party's own leadership fails to offer clear and coherent explanations for its policies, it raises a fundamental question. How can the public place their trust in them to effectively govern the country? Labour asserts that their plans are designed to succeed, yet the question remains, what plans? Beyond vague assurances, there is little tangible evidence of meaningful progress during their time in power. It is understandable, then, that public frustration is mounting. True leadership is not about merely reacting to problems as they arise. It is about presenting a cohesive and forward-thinking vision for the future. At present, however, Labour seems to be navigating a series of decisions without a clear and unified direction, casting doubt on their ability to lead with purpose and clarity.
Living in a Keir Starmer dictatorship. Rumours were swirling that Labour was going to cancel the local elections in England.
Why aren't they all going ahead?
And I would say, even before the white paper has been published,
maybe there's a problem with the line. Why aren't they going ahead, Minister?
Well, at the moment, the assumption is that elections are going ahead. However, it's usual in a process of reorganisation that when a council makes a request for reorganisation, that if there are elections taking place to a council that it essentially won't exist within the term of those elections, then you hold off the elections and you elect to a shadow body, and the shadow body basically is a form of the new councils that will follow.
The fractures within Labour's leadership are becoming increasingly difficult to overlook. Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner campaigned on the promise of strong, decisive leadership, yet their actions have only served to sow doubt among their supporters. The working class, the very foundation of Labour's electoral base, feels increasingly alienated as policies have begun to undermine their well-being. Pensioners, who once placed their trust in Labour's commitment to safeguard their financial security, now find themselves confronted with cuts and rising taxes. Meanwhile, farmers, who have long been vital contributors to the nation's economy, are left questioning whether their decades of hard work even hold any value within the party's current framework. Across the nation, there is a growing disillusionment with Labour's capacity to govern effectively. The promises made during the campaign now ring hollow. Labour assured voters that taxes would not increase, and that both pensioners and workers would be shielded from undue financial hardship. Yet, scarcely after securing power, these commitments have been disregarded, with the policies they pledged to avoid being implemented instead. How can a party expect to maintain the loyalty of its supporters when it so consistently fails to honour its promises?
Message for Keir Starmer.
Resign.
For what reason?
You're ripping off old people, you've gone back on your word, you're a disgrace.
And do you think that he's going to help the housing crisis?
Absolutely not.
And what is the solution? Is it reform? Is it, who is it?
Not really sure yet, but it's certainly not Mr.
I voted
Starmer.
reform. I definitely voted reform.
Yeah, well, I'll give them a try.